have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait to next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast.
And welcome to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. This is episode 80, and we are powered by Fantasy Points Media Group. Welcome, Mr. RSP himself, Matt Waldman. How you doing, Matty?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's great to get you on there. We've had you on the Browns show, so we've talked a little bit Browns. So you know we're going to talk a little bit Browns at the start of the show here. I think Calvin's had a couple different conversations with you, and the best part about someone like yourself who's been around this industry for a while, we've got plenty of stories to work with tonight. So it wasn't very hard. I didn't have to do very much internet stalking to find some stuff we wanted to talk about tonight. So we're ready to roll. And with me, as always, we got Calvin and Hobby. He's got his Team Spotlight series going on over at DLF right now. We got Major. He's the king of the old clubhouse there. He's got a series coming out with us right now. And we've got Tera Roberts with us again, as always. She's basically the best of the four. So we're ready to roll tonight.
You're too kind.
So with that, let's get right, because we got a lot of storytelling to be doing, and we got to talk a lot of other stuff, non-football related. So let's get off the get-go here. Let's talk a little bit about your beloved Cleveland Browns here. A lot of people have them as one of the top teams going into 2021. What are your original thoughts here on the Browns?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in that same company of those people right now. I mean, you see what's going on with that team. They built a strong offensive line, one of the best in football, which means that they can run the ball at will, which is great. When you can keep a game close against the Chiefs and the AFC Championship, or at least close to that, and and be down at halftime and run the football, that tells you that they have confidence in what they do there. And Baker Mayfield took another step in a positive direction. And I think that that's something that if they can continue to have him in positions where he can manage the game in the best possible way, he can be an asset to that team. And of course they have, a strong defense. You can certainly like the upgrades with Clowney coming to the roster to be a pass rushing specialist and really a run stuffer, because that's one of the things that he does the best. And then they get Grant Delpit back, who was probably my favorite player in the 2019 draft from an Achilles tear. If he can come back to what he looked like at LSU his junior season, he could be one of the best young safeties in football, and a guy that they can use in a kind of Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu-esque sort of way where you can move him around and do a lot of things to trick quarterbacks. And if that comes to fruition, Cleveland will be very tough to stop.
You mentioned that offensive line, and I've been saying now I've got the 17th game that kind of helps me out on this, but I've been saying Nick Chubb could get 2,000 yards this year. If they keep turning around and handing him the ball behind that offensive line, he could have a special year. I know you're really high on Nick Chubb. Do you think that's a little bit too much to ask out of him, or do you think, he's got everything it takes to put that together?
I think ability-wise, he is the best candidate to be the next 2,000-yard back. Now, in terms of situation, he needs Kareem Hunt not to be on the field as much as he is. So really, that comes down to if there is an early injury to Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb is pretty much. I think he's a lock for 2,000 yards, but that's unlikely to happen. So what we're looking at there is that the ability's there, but I think he's limited to 1,300 to 1,500 yards, which is still top 5 material, considering that he can also catch the ball and he's going to get a lot of looks in the red zone, and the Browns run a lot. But you guys know, I think he's the best back in football, and I've been a major proponent of his talent for a while.
So I wanted to ask, I know Baker is on, you mentioned Baker's on a lot of people's minds. And I recently looked at him, he really improved the back half of the season once he got comfortable with that offense. And unfortunately, Odell wasn't there. So personally, I think that he's going to have a better connection with Odell this season, but I just wanted to get your opinion on that as well.
I think that's a very logical assumption to make based on what we saw last year, with the fact that they're going to have they have even more time to have built a rapport now during the off season, and they're in the same system for the second year in a row. So I think all of that makes sense. For me, if I were to play the devil's advocate on Baker Mayfield, it would be that he had a very easy schedule last year, especially down the stretch. So it's one of those things where I'm looking forward to seeing what happens when he faces a tougher string of teams this year, and teams are able to look at this offense for the second year and say, here's how we can stop Baker Mayfield and some of the things that they were doing well. And if he can overcome that and show that he can make those adjustments, I think you're right. He can have an amazing year and maybe be a top 7 to top 10 quarterback in fantasy. If it doesn't work out, then I don't think they're going to pay him, and he'll wind up on a new team. And I'll still be lamenting the fact that they didn't get a shot at Trey Lance.
We're starting to get, I want to talk about your RSP for a second, because we're starting to get, those early reports in camp and things like that. And, your favorite running back in this class, all of a sudden people are coming around on, Trey Sermon might be pretty good. These 49ers like him. Who else do you think, like obviously Trey Sermon, but any other rookies that you're hearing good things about that fit in with what you saw on tape?
Michael Carter with the New York Jets. I mean, just the way that he catches the the way he catches the football, he's so dynamic in space. My buddy Cecil Lammy doesn't like his blocking based on the Senior Bowl. I thought he did a little better on tape than maybe he did in the exercises in Mobile. But I think this is a guy that can be a lead back, kind of be somewhere between a mix of Devonta Freeman and Brian Westbrook in the sense of the type of role there. My buddy Jay Moyer, who used to write for me at the RSP, who's at FF Astronauts, who does fantastic work with running backs, has compared him to Alvin Kamara in terms of some of the things that he can do. And I'm not shocked by that. Dwayne Eskridge has had a really fine camp. He's been a favorite. I've joked around that I affectionately call him a little punk because of the way he likes to block. He's kind of a guy who gets under the skin of his opponents by just getting very close to the line, not over it early in games, getting them angry at him and drawing penalties, and then just playing straight up football after that. But in addition to being a great blocker and a former cornerback who knows how to use his hands well off the line, he's a guy who runs really well after the catch and can win, can win deep. And the fact that they can put him in the slot and switch him off with Tyler Lockett, that means that DK Metcalf is now going to be kind of the role that I think Tyler Lockett was last year for Metcalf, which means we're going to see a flip-flop. I think we're going to see Tyler Lockett have the bigger year than DK Metcalf. And a part of that's going to be because Dwayne Eskridge is going to be able to create even juicier matchups for Lockett than what DK Metcalf could create for him. Lockett kind of helped Metcalf more than Metcalf helped Lockett.
Absolutely.
I could definitely see that offense having DK kind of one-on-one on the one side, and then having Eskridge and Lockett kind of set those picks for each other, I guess is a better way to put it, and letting them roll off each other with their agility, their speed, and kind of getting around the corner. And let's not forget, Tyler Lockett is a top 12 wide receiver based on stats. Now, he was more of a boom or bust last year. He would have those big games, and he'd give you nothing. If Lockett can get that consistency down, we could be talking about a wide receiver in the top 8 going into 2021 that you're getting at what value wide receiver, late wide receiver 2 right now, maybe early 3rd wide receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of that thing where Eskridge helps Lockett more than Metcalf helps Lockett. So now next thing you know, if Lockett's in the middle of the field because teams have to respect Eskridge on the outside, he might be running free against safeties in situations where Russell Wilson is just going to be able to toss that ball up there like he did 2 years ago to him. And that can be massive for him. So, I mean, those are guys that kind of fit for me off the bat who, I'm sure there are others that come to mind. I mean, certainly Trey Lance looks really comfortable, but he was going to look comfortable in that offense. That was a perfect match for him. Ronald, Moore, am I thinking? Yeah.
No, you're right. More.
Yeah. Rondale. I said Ronald. Why did I say Ronald? Rondale is, yeah. Rondale is, probably one of the most exciting guys in this particular class for me because of where he winds up Because with AJ Green, even if he's not a fantasy asset anymore, even though you're hearing the spring little pep talk from, Kyler Murray saying he's not done. If you put Rondale Moore and even AJ Green both in the slot, the teams are going to cover AJ Green for the first at least 4 to 6 games of the season, where they're going to put extra attention to him until Rondale Moore burns them a number of times, and they're going to move him around an awful lot. So I'm excited to see what happens with Moore in that situation. And same with Jalen Waddle, who I thought was, people look at him in fantasy and think Henry Ruggs, and they think he's Henry Ruggs 2.0. He's a far better route runner, route runner. And I think he could, if Tua Tagovailoa plays to his ability, and I think he will, Jalen Waddle arguably was almost up there with Jamar Chase in terms of ability, step for step, and what he can do. And he's even more dynamic. And he's a clutch, tough player. I love his game. I wouldn't be shocked at all if he has the best wide receiver season this year.
That's
I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Receivers in the whole draft, man. Thank you for that. That's awesome. I feel smart now. Yeah.
Anyone who knows me knows I'm a big Jalen Waddle guy. He's my wide receiver 1 from this draft class. And I think this is telling us more about how Miami views Tua this year. They went out and they got Will Fuller. They went out and got Jalen Waddle. They obviously trust Tua to take that next step, and they're going to let him grip and rip here in 2021. That's where I think he's going to be exciting. This Miami offense is exciting, and they've still got Devontae Parker to kind of chip in a little bit here and there. But, whoo, boy, it's going to be fun watching them air that ball out. I think they're going to do it.
Yeah, for sure. And then you have Preston Williams, who's their fourth receiver.
Another one of my guys.
Yeah, talented guy. Maybe not great speed, but certainly someone who can. It's not awful by any chance, and you can certainly win the ball well. And I keep an eye on Malcolm Brown just as a sleeper. I can't believe that nobody's like. At least I'm at football guys. I'm looking at the rankings, and he's a guy I've ranked fairly high just because he's such a skilled football player. Who I know that Myles Gaskin had a strong year, but pretty much Malcolm Brown offers everything except speed to his game, and he's a more powerful back. And I just wouldn't be shocked at all if he ends up being the lead back in that offense by year's end.
Okay, like nobody thinks that, and I for whatever reason, Malcolm Brown, nobody would put him on a list of here's like the top most talented running backs, right? But like he seems like he does something that coaches love and earns their trust. Like what is that he does that gets him that work down to the goal line, or important situations where the coach seemed to trust him more than other backs?
I think that the media, they like to look at speed. And, they tend to have their eyes only on speed, and they get really focused on that to a level that it becomes a distraction to everything else, And Malcolm Brown, if you look at his metrics, actually, he was one of the top metrics backs in his draft class in terms of short area change of direction, in terms of burst. He's very powerful. He's a 5-star back out of high school who went to Texas and played his entire career as a starter. He was good. He can catch, he can block, he can run for power. The only thing he can't do is make breakaway runs, and he understands how to make good decisions. So he's a guy that teams like GMs and coaches, they don't want to pay big money to, because he's not that breakaway back. They want that breakaway speed to be starter material. But, he can be that Alfred Morris, that Gary Brown, all those guys in the past who basically could be starters and be 1,300-yard backs if you gave them the chance. But they, year after year, they don't pose that huge threat, that draw of speed. So I think he's just kind of in that boat, and it's a shame because to me, I'd rather have a back who can, you know what you're going to get out of him. That's why Frank Gore's around still right now.
Exactly.
You know what you can get from him.
He runs hard. He runs really hard.
So for those of you tuning in, this is kind of the point. We're right up against 15 minutes where we are done with the football talk, and it's time to get to know Matt a little bit. You're going to step into the Viper pit, but it's okay. Like, we're not too scary. We'll take our turns kind of asking you some questions, and we always like to start off with one that just lets us get to know you a little bit. And says we're in Scott Fishbowl, and like music's a theme, obviously. And so when it comes to you, if you were a closer in baseball or a professional wrestler, and you had an intro song that was going to get the crowd introduced to Matt Waldman? What's the right song to introduce you to a big crowd?
Well, it's funny. The Tape Never Lies Network did one of those things with me as a guest, and it was Back in Black with AC/DC. Well, I like AC/DC, and I'm totally cool with that. I think my wife liked that, so I'll roll with that. Though probably the joke version would be I would be Sacha Baron Cohen in Talladega Nights, and they would probably have me playing jazz, and everybody'd be looking around, because that's kind of the music I like a lot. That or like some old soul like Michelle Ndegeocello or folks like that who I'm big fans of. So, but yeah, I have a feeling that it would either be Back in Black or I'd be playing the villain Formula One race car driver in Talladega Nights.
Love that.
So I could be mistaken here, but I thought maybe you'd be more into something, maybe a little more jazz, or maybe even perhaps maybe a little collective soul. Would you maybe bring collective soul into this somehow?
They slept on my couch. Well, the lead singer sleep on my couch, and the producer was my roommate. But yeah, they're great. But I'm more of a jazz guy. Yeah. I like all ranges of music, but that's not going to get anybody pumped up probably, other than 5 people out of every 100 in the stadium. So I you've got to kind of got to know your audience at that point, right? So that's how that would go.
Playing sports is very important growing up. What sports were you involved in? Like, who did you look up to? Who was your idols?
I played organized sports. I played baseball. I played soccer. I did when I was younger. I did some wrestling camps. I wish I stuck with wrestling. I really enjoyed that. Football, I never played organized football except for maybe one season, and I was late to that. And I really love football. I probably played football more than anything, but it was always just like in the backyard or out at the football field with our football team, our band against the football team, things like that. We'd do a lot of things like that. I probably played football probably at least 3 to 4 times a week until I was about 18 years old. That was it for me. But because I was studying music, I always had conflicts with being able to play on the football team, and neither the coach nor the band director was keen on me doing both. And so it worked out in its favor, because it's not like I was going to become a high school football star. I mean, I was an early bloomer, so I was 5'11", 150 in about 8th grade. So I was one of the bigger kids in school, but then I just pretty much stayed that height and weight as other people caught up. So it wasn't like I was going to, anything was going to happen from that. But football wise, I mean, look, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio until I was about 10 years old. So everybody talked about Jim Brown as if he was he is a living legend, but so, and for so many reasons, and so Jim Brown was revered in terms of what he did football wise. I was a big fan of Ozzie Newsome. He was probably one of the first players that, when you're a kid, I kind of imitated, and, we would try and imitate out on the field. And so I was a big fan of guys like that. And
what about Ernest Byner or John Elway? Heard you cite John Elway. What's that story?
Yeah, I was a huge Ernest Byner fan, and he's probably one of my favorite players growing up. Once I got into my teens, I just loved his effort. I loved the fact that he wasn't this big star coming out of school, but he played like one, and he was an overachiever. And I always identified with that, people who worked really hard and who gave that type of effort. And he was a smart player. And the whole thing with John Elway is that my father was a Denver native from about 1973 until about 2 to 3 years ago, when he retired to Arizona. So every summer I'd go out to Denver to see him. And so I always would hear all this about John Elway. And of course, most of my family was from Cleveland. I had moved down to Atlanta at that point in about around 1980, but I remained a Browns fan. So when the Browns went to those 3 Super Bowl or through 3 championship appearances in the AFC Championship and lost each of those 3 times against the Denver Broncos, that was heartbreaking as a fan. But it had a little bit of extra to it when your father was a big Elway fan, and we all and our whole family talked trash with him, and then they'd go and end up in the Super Bowl and lose, So, but John Elway was certainly John Elway was a great player. But I'll joke that I had a moment with John Elway where I got my own little personal revenge with that, at least from a standpoint, because about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe it was longer now, I was at the Senior Bowl with Cecil Lammey and Gene and Emery Hunt and a few other people. And we were at a Starbucks where just outside the stadium. And Cecil was getting one of those coffees that he gets that are basically milkshakes, but disguised as coffee, or coffee disguised as milkshakes, So we were getting one of those, and John Elway comes in, and he knows John because he's Denver media, and says hello to him. And John walks in, and he's got 2 other guys with him who look like former players. And so I always joke with Cecil, I'm like, well, will you bail me out? Because this is my opportunity to go sack John Elway. Somebody from Cleveland needs to do it. So, So I get in line, and he's talking to these 2 guys, and one of the guys turns around and looks at me and does a double take, and he's like, "You're that guy with the YouTube videos." And then he nudges his friend, and they both turn their back on John Elway while he's talking to them in mid-sentence, and start geeking out over the RSP film room. And we're like, "Do you watch his stuff?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I turn and look at Cecil, and he's just looking at me slack jawed. Gene's laughing. Emery's just shaking his head. And they're like, "Can I get your card?" And he's like, "Do you subscribe to stuff?" "Yeah, I subscribe to stuff." And John Elway, meanwhile, is looking over their shoulder, "Who is this guy?" So I went home and told my dad that I didn't get to sack John Elway. I said, but 2 guys who told me that they were interviewing to be scouts. And I was thinking, you don't want to turn your back on John Elway in mid-sentence to geek out over me and try and get a job with John Elway. But hey, whatever. So that was my little personal, fun with that as a fan.
Love that.
Scouting tip. Listen to John Elway before Matt Waldman if you're trying to get a job with John Elway. You mentioned Cecil and going down to these Senior Bowls. You've gone to these many, many times. Was there an Ernest Byner story in there as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you meet a lot of people. I mean, you see a lot of people, and sometimes you get to meet them. I mean, I've gotten a chance to see, a number of guys, but yeah, I did, I've interviewed a lot of guys too, because I did some work with the New York Times blog in the past, and I've done some journalism in the past. So usually you don't geek out or have fan moments over people just because you want to make sure that you're not, taken away from their time or making it awkward or anything like that. But I was down there, and we were watching a running back. We were watching DeMarco Murray, who I was a big fan of at that time. And we were sitting there. And at that time, you could sit by the fence, and you didn't have to be Jay Glazier or an ESPN writer to sit by the fence and actually watch the practices that close up. But they changed that. So, and I understand for good business reasons, but, yeah, Ernest Byner and Sam Gash kind of sidled up on either side of me to start watching players too. And they were kind of talking back and forth, on either side of me. So I kind of added my 2 cents a little bit in there. And then we started talking a little bit more. And then by the end of it, but the whole time I was like, again, I've had a chance to interview a lot of guys who are a lot more famous probably than Ernest Byner, but because I was such a huge Byner fan, I was just geeking out inside, going, okay, just hold it together. Don't say it. Don't be a fanboy right now, But at the end, I couldn't help it. So after the practice, I just said, I just got to say, and he was very gracious. So it was a lot of fun. And Cecil joked around that I looked like a kid in a candy store, and I did.
That's awesome.
Well, side note, as a Packers fan, I greatly appreciate your Elway story. My fandom began in the late 90s, so that's wonderful for me.
hey, I'm with you. And for, one of my oldest friends who we probably used to we used to probably disturb everybody in our apartment complex because we do Oklahoma drills in the hallway when we were 10 or 11 years old, or even 12 years old. I'm surprised we didn't have to pay for damages down there. I remember he was an Alabama fan and a Atlanta Falcons fan, still is. And I remember I came home from college one year, and he said to me, and we were watching the second half of the Falcons game because he made us stay to watch the second half of this preseason game because of this quarterback, excuse me, out of Southern Miss, who he just told me all these crazy stories about how good he was and how good he was going to be, and how, you know, and the whole story about the car wreck and what he did against Alabama after that. And yeah, we watched Brett Favre for all of like about part of a quarter and didn't get to see a whole lot of that. But I remember when he ended up in Green Bay and he started playing, that it did benefit my fantasy teams because of my buddy Trey. So, you know, he was probably, he was a better scout than I was. That's for sure.
So to kind of dive a little more into you personally, tell us about a decision that changed the trajectory of your life. Something that's not marriage or birth of kids.
Good question. I was a music student for 2.5 years at the University of Miami. And I like to say that I learned more in those 2.5 years and that I've been able to apply to my life outside of music more than any other experience that I've had. I was, you know, I made that reference of Collective Soul sleeping on my couch. That was because my roommate turned out to be the youngest producer ever for Virgin American Records. I'm not the producer, CEO of Virgin American Records. He worked with Jermaine Dupri. He co-wrote songs with Willie Nelson. He founded and discovered Matchbox 20 and Rob Thomas. You know, he's done all sorts of stuff. I used to have to wake him up for his lessons, and I'll just say that his teacher used to use the Lord's name in vain when he would call up at 8 o'clock in the morning because he was late, and I would usually tell him that the Lord was was calling him to wake him up. But anyway, he was a great guy. There were a number of great musicians who came out of that school, and I was like a big fish in a small pond. So I had to work very hard to kind of get my footing there and stay in that program. It was very competitive. And just as things were starting to work out for me, I stayed that summer and I was playing gigs, and I played a lot of like Latin dance music and big band music and things like that down there back in the late 80s. And just as things were going well, I had sprained my ankle. Just playing Frisbee. Like I played football pretty much every day, and we played without pads, and we hit each other and did things that probably I should have gotten injured a lot worse than I ever did. And I had never like even sprained anything. And I sprained my ankle playing Frisbee. And so I ended up going to, I was mad. Like I couldn't believe that, And so I went to the emergency room. And when I was there, this guy was, I was a little nervous, and the guy was the X-ray tech was talking to me. And as he was talking to me, he just changed the subject from whatever he was talking about. And it was as if he like looked right through me. Have you ever had someone look at you and it looks like they looked right through you? Yeah. He looked right through me and was like, when you get sick or you get hurt, it usually means that your soul's telling your body and brain that you're going in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And then he just switched off to talking about whatever he was talking about before. It's as if I hallucinated it. Maybe I did. He didn't shoot me up with anything, but it was certainly I remember that it felt like that. It felt like reality changed and then went back to what it was. And about 3 months later, I ended up changing my major and leaving school. And deciding that I wanted to do something different, and I wasn't sure what that was. And I think though that decision, I ended up stopping playing music until about last year. Wow. That decision really helped me kind of untie a lot of things in my life that I needed to, and evaluate things and kind of focus on digging deep on a lot of things, both personally and what I wanted to do with my life. And I think that it helped me understand that that I was a focused individual, and that eventually I needed to pursue things that allowed me to give a lot of deep focus to. And when you look at the RSP, I think you see that that's the product of someone who's very focused on what they do. So,
so kind of continuing along this journey, within the fantasy industry over the course of your career, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen?
Video by far, because as someone who, I started just writing about things more from a stats and numbers standpoint, and then really started digging into film. It was very hard at first to do a site where you're just taking still pictures of like Robert Griffin versus certain types of coverage, and you're showing like, it feels like, like those old Mickey Mouse cartoons where you could take the pages and literally flip them to see like every move. I felt like that's what I was doing with still pictures. So and at least that's what I was hoping I was doing. I know that wasn't coming across that way, but that was a pain, and it didn't really show things at the level that you can now with video. So while I'm known for, going in a lot of depth and writing a lot of long form, I can make 2, 3, 5-minute videos and make a lot of them and cover my points in a very succinct way where, it would take me, hundreds of words to do the same thing. And it wouldn't be as an entertaining reading for people on that level. So being able to do that video is great. DFS has really changed the fantasy landscape a ton. Just from the standpoint of that, I think fantasy people always like to bet. I'm not a big bettor by trade. That's not my thing, but I understand why people like doing it. And I think that DFS brought in a whole group of people who were very results oriented. Just give me the answers, and I think that that's, on one hand, that can be very good for the industry. And it provides another starting point from the standpoint that there are people who start with that and then they realize, you know what? I want something new. This Dynasty stuff seems pretty cool. I want to get into that. I like football. I just did it for the betting, but now I'm like, want to learn more about football, want to learn more about the game. And then they get into things like Dynasty and season long. And then they start to want to learn more and dig deeper. And as a result of that, it's a nice gateway. So a lot of people may look at it as, well, this is how the industry is going now. So you've got to start looking at things in that fashion. But I honestly think all things can be a gateway. I mean, I know a lot of my readers are my age, 45 and up. And maybe some of them are starting to have more free time because their kids have left the nest and they can dig deeper into things that they're interested in. And my stuff can serve as a reference that way. Or there's folks who are just like, I can skim through Matt's stuff and find the answers that I want. And that's fine too. But I trust what Matt does because he's been doing it for a while, whatever the reason is. But I like the fact that there are multiple avenues. So I'd say DFS and video are probably two of the biggest changes during my time. And the fact that you can do mock drafts and get all this data and do it and have a computer actually legitimately want to do it. I mean, be able to provide good answers and do good AI with that, because that's how I was going to get into this. I was trying to build a mock draft site that would do all that. And I had a friend who had enough technical capability to be able to do that. But it was going slow. And I was writing columns for doing it that I called the gut check that was going to be on my site. And then my buddy Mike McGregor over at DLF, who was at FF Today, he and I were in a website together, in a league together, Dynasty League together, that was introduced to me by my buddy who, in the Brett Favre story. And Mike was like, I like how you write. Have you ever written anything? And I had done a lot of freelance writing. So I was like, yeah. And I actually have some columns. And that's kind of how that got started with Mike. So it's kind of gone full circle that way. And it's good that I didn't start a site because I have that way, because I'm sure that mock draft thing we were doing wasn't going to work out all that well.
Take us back to those early days, because you talk about like some of the changes and what's new, but like let's go back to some of those early days with Mike McGregor. With at some point, I know I don't have the full timeline together, but I know you were at a call center, and he said like he would have loved to have been a fly on the wall with you talking to these people calling, and like he's sure you've got some great stories about these people calling you, and like you saying like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. and like things like that. But at some point you decided this fantasy football thing, like there's something here and this could be an industry that I could have something to give to. What was that like breaking into the industry up front?
It was kind of the Wild West at that time because, back in that day, I had left school. I looked at a bunch of different colleges and realized that I wasn't going to get the money that I was going to get academically coming out the first time around. So I went to the University of Georgia, which wasn't as good of a school as it is now. But back then it was just kind of like, okay, I'll go there. I'll work my way through school. So after doing a little bit of a stint building sets at a scene shop at the University Theater, which was hilarity in itself, I ended up working in a telemarketing center selling children's books, like the little golden books, and selling those to kids, to parents, and then that job turned into a full-time job where I was doing supervisory work and direct and management work, and then the industry changed into having call centers. And so I started working in call centers and I ended up working my way into a director role. And I was, in my early 30s, a director of a company that had about 10,000 employees and about 70 branches. And I worked in a corporate role at a local level, like at a local site. So I would travel some, but I worked there. And all my friends joked that I was the last person they thought would ever stay there as long as I did, much less as they thought I'd be there shorter than they were. But I was still there, and I got introduced to fantasy football that way because it was an office game. It was like 1994, 1995. I missed the first draft. Like the first draft, they asked me to come to, and I completely flaked out on it, which is kind of funny now when I think about that. This is my career, and I completely just skipped out on a draft. They were like, "That's okay, don't worry about it. You'll do it next year." And so I, at that time, it was just like what I'm sure if you had Joe Bryan on here, I'm sure Joe probably talked about the same thing. They'd meet up at a bar, they'd take the newspaper, they would just score everything out during Monday Night Football and we'd watch the Monday night game and see the results, and so then they'd have a computer program that maybe you could, if you were spending any money, where you could end up feeding it in, and they would give you the scores, at least a couple times during the week so that you can at least do that quickly if you wanted to. But the local drafts were great. I remember my first team, somebody was recommending to me, giving me advice and saying, everybody picks running backs early, so why don't you start, you might want to look at a wide receiver or something like that, so those types of things were fun. But, the industry itself, I remember some of my employees were writing for KFFL, writing for their newswire. And then they kept telling me about Football Guys in around 1997, 98, saying that this was like a really good site. It had everything that you'd want looking for from that site. And I remember thinking, I really like this place. And I'd go I kind of lurk on the forums and see people on there like Bob Henry and David Dodds and John Norton and Jason Wood. And I'd occasionally contribute there. But they asked for contributing writers back in 2001 after I went away for a little bit. I took a trip. I quit my job and ended up in Jamaica for a year.
Nice.
And so I was there for a year writing and working a little bit. I was supposed to be working full time, but then they basically, out of negotiations for my ex, who was a director at a Ritz-Carlton, they basically, to get more employees there, they basically said, we're limiting work visas. So, and instead of doing the work that I thought I was going to be doing, I was just doing like basically freelance writing there for that year. And so when I came back, around 2001, I went back to the company I was at because they were going to offer me a promotion just before really on the day I was telling them I was giving my notice, they were giving me a promotion. So it was like, which was kind of funny. And I had to turn that down and, because it was a chance of a lifetime. But yeah, I ended up writing for Football Guys as like a guest writer in 2001. And I remember David Dodds was like, this was really good. Would you like to, I think I was writing about Marty Booker, I think at that time, if anybody remembers him, but he he's like, "This is really good. You want to do something else?" I was like, "No, I don't know really what I want to do." And I just didn't really respond, and I didn't write anything for another 2 to 3 years until I met up with Mike McGregor. But I always laughed because I had done something with football guys back then, but they were the site, I remember at that time, and I always thought I would want to work with them. And then FF Today gave me a great opportunity, and it was great to work with Mike McGregor and Mike Kruger and that crew. And it's a good looking site, still a good looking site to this day. Really well put together, free site. Their free site rivals what a lot of pay sites look like. So, and they came up in that day where, the first run of ads was like, they were just like doing something like doing their own leagues, and suddenly advertisers were coming along going, if you would make this public, we'll pay you money to put ads on the site, and people want to come to it. Maybe you do a little bit more. And it was like this first wave of stuff like that. And I feel like I came in like at the end of the first wave, the early second wave. And when it came to fantasy writers, I knew all the first wave guys were the site owners. And I was kind of like an early second generation writer for that group to be able to see that, because it was just before, it was still the age of you must live in your mom's basement, and before the internet really started to propel it. And then like 2 to 3 years after I started writing, the internet became a bigger thing. And then 2 to 3 years after that, every church was doing a fantasy site, doing a fantasy league at that point. And it had exploded. So it was kind of fun to come in on that wave. And I was very fortunate as a result of that.
I love how you bring up the old Wild West of fantasy football. Those are some of my favorite stories. Bob Harrison's 1-800 numbers, Paul Charchian running his newsletter out of his apartment building, hiring people from the floor down. Hearing these stories is fantastic. And I love how you kind of tied in Jamaica here, because my next question is kind of going in that direction here somewhat. So COVID's hit, and my wife and I, we have to find a show to watch together, right? It's kind of one of those things, couples thing. We got into the show Manifest. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to watch Manifest here yet. Anyway, there's a bunch of passengers who end up getting on a plane, and the plane disappears for 5.5 years, and they reappear. And all kinds of weird things are going on. Everyone else is 5 years older. They're still the same age. And there happened to be this stowaway on the plane. Now, Matt,
spoiler alert, let's do that too.
Hypothetically, if you were a stowaway on a plane, how would you do it?
Well, I've done it. So,
So
but it was
ready.
Yeah, I've done it, but it won't ever happen. It won't ever happen again, because it was mostly like an older version of Home Alone goes to the airport. Because as a kid, I was about 14 years old, and I was a product of divorce. So, think about, you can go back and watch, any 80s movie, probably a John Hughes movie, and it would probably fit into a John Hughes script, though. Without the hair like they had, but I would say, I was coming back from Denver. My father, at that time, before 2001, you could just go up. Anyone could accompany you to the gate, and they could even walk you onto the airplane if they wanted to. So I think I was 13 or 14. At that time, I was starting to play my instrument more seriously. So I had this big old saxophone case that was about, 2/3 my height, a big old wooden case along with a backpack. And so when we went to the gate and got on the plane, I think I forgot my backpack. Took my saxophone on the plane, forgot my backpack. So my dad comes on the plane with the backpack, hands me the backpack, and I have to get up out of my chair. And I told him to hold my ticket. So he puts the ticket in his front pocket, and I'm putting my thing, and everything should be fine, right? Because we're just heading to Atlanta. I'm on the plane, whatever. Well, Atlanta has storms. It gets fogged over, and Atlanta Hartsfield is closed down due to fog. So they divert the flight to Huntsville, Alabama, and they take everybody off the plane, and they're like telling everybody, okay, here's your options. The flight's been terminated. You can get a hotel room near town or at the airport, and wait till tomorrow, and we'll take your ticket, and you'll have your ticket, and you can get on board tomorrow. Well, I can't get a hotel room. I'm not old enough. I don't have a credit card. Then they're like, you can rent a car. Of course, same deal. So I'm looking for my ticket. Can't find my ticket. I'm 13 years old. I'm not thinking maturely about how I could explain how I got on. I must have misplaced my ticket, but how did I get here if I didn't have a ticket, But I didn't think that. I thought, they're not going to let me, I'm going to be stuck here in Huntsville. So I don't know what I'm going to do, but let me call my parents. So I call my dad. The line's busy. Cause again, this is like call waiting was like avant-garde technology at that time. So like, I call waiting at like 10:30, 11:30. It's later than that. I think it's like more like 12:30 at night from a payphone. Line's busy. Try calling my mom. Line's busy. And then I add 2 and 2 together is like, I can just imagine the conversation my mother and father are having right now. He's not listed on the plane. And my father going, he was on the plane. I saw him put on the plane. No, he's not. They say he's not on the plane. He's like, unless he jumped off the plane, he was on the plane. So anyway, after trying to call them a couple times and knowing that they were using up this more air than I am right now, basically that I just hung up, and I heard this married couple talking as I sat down, wondering what I was going to do. And the woman basically looked at the man and was like, there's an Eastern airline flight that has radar equipment. They're going to try and fly into Atlanta. And if they're given permission by the tower, they're going to land. If they're not, they're going to turn back around, but they have some things they need to kind of get in there. So they're going to try and do that. You want to go? He's like, yeah, let's go. So they start running off. So me and my saxophone case, my backpack, I get up and start running after them and follow them. And we go up onto the runway, go up the stairs, get into the plane, and it's a stretch 727. I get in this far back as I can, and there's those curtains they used to have for closets. They'd have the closets that was just basically an open area with curtains, and I was sitting back by those curtains, and no flight attendant was there. Like they were just like still like getting coffee, whatever, getting ready. And the flight attendant comes on, and there's like maybe about 15 people on the plane spread out, and she starts collecting tickets. And I'm like, oh, I'm freaking out what I'm going to do. So I duck down and I crawl over to the curtain, and I hide in the closet. and then she doesn't see me. And so they basically lock up the plane, start taxiing down the runway. And when she sits in the jump seat, I come out and I sit down in my seat. We land in Atlanta. I'm walking out and she's looking at me the whole time, just like eyeballing me, like has that look like, she's got the professional smile, but she's like, I don't remember him. Where, and I just say goodnight and I walk out. Never seen Atlanta's airport that empty, the busiest airport in the world. It was nothing but just employees. And I called my mom at about 4:30 in the morning, and she's like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm at the airport. And I'm like, can you just pick me up? I'll explain everything if you can just pick me up. So I never thought about that until after 2001 and started reading about stowaways and thought, yeah, I actually stowawayed on a plane once.
That's funny. We all have those home leagues that we love and we started with. Talk to us about your favorite like home league or one of your first leagues.
My first home league was the work league that I worked at, with the people I worked with, and that was a great league. That was probably my favorite league, and I did that for a good 10, 12, years, maybe longer. It was based out of Athens, Georgia, where I lived at that time. A lot of UGA fans, obviously, folks there who were guys who went to school there. Some Packer fans. One of my close friends in that league was a diehard Packer fan. But it was great because we were in our mid to late 20s and through to our mid 30s. So we had a good time, because people were usually just buying homes at that time. They had a basement. We'd get a chance we'd make it something where it was just an opportunity to hang out, maybe the night before, play Madden or play poker or backgammon and just kind of catch up and talk and and then be able the next day we would do the draft, and we just make that like a weekend type of thing that we look forward to. And there were folks that, because it was a work league, there was a lot of trash talking, and because we all kind of grew up together, we would have a lot of fun talking trash. And one of my favorite times with that is how much we would plan things, because I had a workmate where basically we were Jim and Dwight from The Office. Like, I'd have to say I was Jim, he was Dwight. Okay. And we would prank each other all the time. So one of the things that we ended up doing one year was he was a good fantasy player. And so we would talk enough trash. I said, one year I just said, listen, man, every time we play, let's go to the grocery store the morning before and buy as much food and drink as we can afford to do, and just hang out and just be gluttons and just talk trash all afternoon, all evening. And then at the end of the day, who's ever winning gets to leave and the loser has to pay the tab. So we'd have fun because we'd sit there and eat stuff and go, man, this sure tastes good right now being up by 20, or like, do you want me to, can you make, since Emmitt Smith just scored for the third time, can you make me, can you go in the kitchen and grab me this, and we would just
adding up the tab.
We would just egg each other on like that. And we had a good time that way. And so things like that were kind of epic, for being in your 20s and knowing that you could eat that much and burn it off and or not get sick from doing that. Just a good day playing one-on-one for a couple hours in August, and you would think that never happened. But if I did that now, I'd probably have sunstroke, sprain something, and have indigestion afterwards. So,
I want to go back and ask you a little bit about, we mentioned the different types of media and video. You get the RSP film rooms, things like that, the breakdowns. You got long forms of that. Now you got short forms of that. Another thing that you were really early on was podcast. And I think really early on, there was the ESPN, there was CBS, there was like some of those. And then there was the Audible, which I think goes back a long way and is one of the, more long running shows that's had the same cast of characters with Gene and Cecil and Sigmund. And you guys have a great connection. Like I've always enjoyed your show. Take us behind the scenes a little bit about how did that come together? And just some of the interaction between you guys. It's clear you guys are friends off the microphone. Just take us back to that group and what makes that group special.
Yeah, thank you. And we appreciate that because it's a great thing to be a part of. Obviously the most of the credit should go to Cecil, just because with the work that he's done in radio and then what he was able to do in terms of his vision for having a podcast. I think that he and then Sigmund should get the bulk of the credit there. I kind of came aboard because I was at FF Today. I was starting the RSP that was like this thing no one ever even heard of. And so it was one of those deals where they had seen that I had the same sickness they did about rookies, because they were trying to do like this Football Guys TV where it was video breakdowns of players, kind of like what the RSP film room is, but they had a more professional camera crew and able to go and do things. And they were just a little bit too ahead of their time with that. It didn't quite work out. But they had me on, and it was just a natural kind of rapport that we had. And I remembered the first time doing it because at the time I was at my house in Athens, and we had converted a garage into an extra room, and I made that my office eventually. And I remember I couldn't get good reception on my cell phone, and I was literally praying that my phone wasn't going to go dead, or like get interference. So I was literally talking in the closet of this room, doing a show with them, because that was where the best reception was. I had figured out. So I was literally talking to them in a closet. But we had a good rapport. And then when I ended up at Football Guys, I had been a guest often enough with them that they just felt like it was a good idea, asked me if I would want to come on and be a permanent part of it. And they're just great guys. I mean, everybody at Football Guys, there's nothing wrong with fraternities. I'm just not a fraternity kind of guy, but if there was a fraternity that I would belong to and I would maintain a membership to, it would probably be the People at Football guys. Just because there's a lot of different folks there, in terms of their backgrounds, in terms of their point of views, in terms of how they do things. But everyone, the common thing is that they do love this. They love the hobby. There are a lot of very intelligent people there who are just good people. I would say that's the common thing. And I find that when we used to have these retreats, and I think they'll still have them, when, over time. And when we get together, it's just like, we talk about everything but football at that point, and it's just a great way to be able to catch up and get to know these folks. And, I've gotten a chance to do that with Sigmund and Cecil over the years, and Gene, who's one of my best friends. I probably egg on Gene as more than anybody, and I like to joke with him on the show. And I think I probably I either play the wet blanket or the goofball, that like the class clown on that show, probably more often than not, with a lot of stuff. And I like to make fun of Gene a lot. But they're all great folks, and the dynamic is fun because we all kind of have our niche, and we all can make fun of one another and enjoy that. And it just feels like guys who are, anybody, your friends who are just hanging out at a restaurant, or family hanging out and doing things like that. And, it fit that way. Even when, like, my wife and daughter, we love to joke around. And so when Cecil and Gene came down to go to the Senior Bowl, we had dinner with them, and, my wife and daughter are already laying into me within 2 minutes, and then they're laying into each other, and then they start doing it with Cecil and Sigmund, or Cecil and Gene. And it was kind of funny, like, to see Gene just kind of dove right in, which you would think Gene would be the one who looked like the deer in headlights, but Gene's like firing off, quips right back like it was nothing. Cecil was a little bit of a deer in headlights at first, but Cecil's a salt of the earth human being who his bravado on the air, if I'm going to give away anything, he's a little bit of a different person. He's magnifying that aspect of himself on the air, which is great. And he has that certainly off the air. But there's a little more salt of the earth to him off the air that you won't normally see. So it was kind of funny to see that with him. When we were doing that, because my wife and daughter both commented on that. They were like, they thought it was going to be the other way around, and it was Gene that was like, kind of firing off the little quips back and forth.
Nice. We talked about what changes you've seen in the industry throughout your career, but what changes have you seen in yourself personally through fantasy football?
I think for me, it was a lot about learning how to run a business and learning to embrace who you are, what you stand for, and how you want to be. I was very much, one of the reasons I probably left playing music was that I was a people pleaser. I grew up a people pleaser. And that was due to reasons that weren't always so pleasant. So as a result of that, I learned to cope by people pleasing. And so while I was a good student, I was involved in a lot of things. And I think probably in school, people would probably have never known what was going on in my life. That when I became an adult and now I could live life as myself, I didn't know who that was. And so when I started to encounter obstacles and difficulty to what I wanted to do in my late teens and early 20s, it was much harder for me to deal with it because I had never really failed. I had never really experienced failure. I had never really had to work hard at something and then not succeed at it. And my first taste of that was when I went to a school where basically it was filled with future Grammy Award winners and record executives. And I was like, yeah, like I'm singing with someone now who's going to have Indy Irie on stage with him, and I'm playing in the background of an Earth, Wind, and Fire band, which is great,
Wow.
but that's not going to be like, I'm not going to be one of those people, and, so learning to cope with that took me a long time. And so when, a lot of what I had to work on, I did in my mid to late 20s. And then by my early 30s, I had kind of gotten that together. And I had realized in my life that I was doing good work in my career, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I had just done this so that I could, just kind of tread water and stay afloat, figuring out who I was and how to be the person I needed to be, which was, authentic and honest and, and embrace who I am and figure out who that was. And, so when I realized that that I wanted to write for a living and that I did want to do that, fantasy football was an avenue to be able to do that. And then starting a business with the RSP was, again, getting into I didn't want to be just a fantasy guy. Like, I love fantasy football. I love the readers that I have as a result of it. And I will always be a fantasy guy, but I wanted to be a football writer and a football analyst too. And so the RSP is very much a scouting guide. And to get into an industry where it was like you had to be a former player or a scout in the league to do what you're doing to get any respect, it was, as Russ Landy would put it, the scouting director of the Montreal Alouettes, he was kind of like, it's harder to become a scout than it is to become a football player, and it's harder to become a media scout than it is to become a scout. I don't know if that's true, but I can tell you that the reason why I'm so detailed is because I knew that I had to show people what I was doing for them to take me seriously. And so the what's changed for me is it was kind of like finishing school for me to make sure that I was being authentic, that I was persevering, that I wasn't quitting or giving up on something that when I ran into obstacles, and that I was going to embrace what I was about and take the lessons I learned, because I've had tests of, should I keep doing this? Especially from a financial standpoint, juggling multiple jobs, having setbacks like a lockout, and, having financial issues as a result of that, or having opportunities that seem like that's great, but knowing that if I take that opportunity, it might be the end of this venture. If I took an opportunity with NFL.com, if I took an opportunity with Roto World, those were two opportunities that I had to weigh, that I turned down because even though I wasn't making a full-time living doing this, but those are decisions that I think if I hadn't gone through what I did in my early 20s and figured a lot of things out, I don't think I would have made the decisions I did that turned out to be the best thing. So for me, fantasy football was a reinforcement of a lot of things I worked very hard on as an individual, basically to grow up and try and be as mature of a person as I can, at least off the air.
Awesome answer. And then just, to wrap up, one last question, advice for those of us trying to make it in the industry.
Wow. That's the question I dread the most, because it's like the one I wish I could give a great answer to. I came in at the right time. I mean, I came, like we said, it was like just before it really got big. Now it's like there's a lot of people that want to do this. It is very competitive. The things that I'll say this, know who you are. That's one of the best things I can say, is know who you are and what you're good at, and don't try to be something different. I did listen to a little bit of Joe Bryant on this podcast a little bit, just because I wanted to see, what you guys were asking a little bit. I did a little scouting. I mean, that's my job, right? So,
Nice.
And he mentioned, and it's, we've had this discussion. It's just like, there are some people who will never read my work that are at Football Guys, because what Joe wants to try and appeal to is a part of the market too, that they just want the answers, man. And so I'm not an answers man kind of person in that way. Though I've been thinking about pranking people and doing that for a little while, and see what people would say. But part of it is knowing that, like, I know my strength is long form, going into detail. And so when you have opportunity, sometimes you have to know whether that's a good opportunity for you. And are you doing it just to get clicks and doing it just to become famous or just to become known? Or do you want to, or is it really a fit that's going to work for you? Like, Bob Harris was someone I loved when I first started, when I first started this industry, and I wanted to be like Bob, and he wrote these great newsletter pieces, and I read a lot of his stuff, and, and I'm thankful to call him a really good friend now. But, when I did get an opportunity, at one time I had an opportunity to write for Fox Sports and do a column that was going to be national every week about fantasy football. But I looked at their site, I looked at what they were doing, and it was all like 350 to 500 words. And I'm like, you like my work and you think that I'm becoming popular and I'm writing 1,500 words minimum, and you want me to do a 500-word piece? That's not me. Like, that's sucking the soul out of what I do to do that. So what I would say to you is that if you know what you're good at and people respond to that, you're going to know because people respond to it. They're going to become really big fans of it. And when you get people who become diehard fans of what you do, you might joke that there's only 3 of them. But there may only be 3 out of 10, 3 out of 20. But there's enough of them out there, because I make a living now on something that most people would tell you there's no way that should be economically viable, because it's being yourself and doing what you do. So I would say, build on your strengths, know what they are. When people respond to them that way, know that that's validation to keep doing what you were doing. And then the last thing I'd say is that if you are a writer and you want to be a good writer, and this was something I mentioned on Twitter the other day, is, find your favorite writers and literally find your favorite 3 to 5 pieces and just type them out, like do one a week every day, just for 20, 30 minutes, type it out word for word, and then rotate to the next one the next week, and do that for like 6 months. If you do that for 6 months, you're going to learn a ton about how you set up, how you tell a story, how do you set things up, the rhythm, the tone, the mood, the voice. Find out what your voice is going to, the things that appeal to you are part of your voice. And one of the things that I know that people like about my work is that I have a unique voice, and they know that the way they read me, it's almost like how I talk, except it's more articulate in the writing, because I stutter and stammer and go off track here. But that's the thing, is that if you do that, you're going to absorb that. It happens naturally. It may feel like you're watching grass grow, but you will become a much better writer doing that. And I just say, again, if you find something that you are passionate about and delve in it, and it's unique to what the industry is doing, keep going down that road. Because the people I know who've had success, Chase Stewart with his site, Matt Harmon, Reception Perception, Dwayne McFarland, you look at those folks, and they had something. They weren't trying to be everything. They delved into something. Now, if you're good at the everything thing, you're like the good game show host. You're kind of like, to me, Bloom's kind of like a game show host. He can delve into everything, and he can share a lot with you. I joke that he's the cult leader, but like he's great with that. And he's great with game strategy and being able to take things and distill it into, this is how this is going to work, or this is what this is going to do. And people love that. He's great at that. He knows his lane. So it's like just figuring those things out. So I'd say those are the things I would give advice to.
Great advice.
Yeah, I love that. I love listening to your voice. It's got that deep, soothing kind of touch to it too. So
right.
I keep listening to
the jazz.
That's that smooth jazz, Matty Waldman here. Come on.
Well, see, I'm trying to work on my sound. I've been practicing for the past for the past 8-9 months now and taking lessons again. So I'm hoping that my sound gets as good as my voice comes across to people. If that can happen, then maybe in 10 years I might be playing music again for gigs and when I retire. So there we go.
I think we have a potential saxophone intro music for the ViperCast in the future here. No,
we could possibly do that.
That'd be awesome.
See, there you go. You know. If we did this, so y'all would have to be participatory. So like, I would, we'd have to have some of you like clapping on 2 and 4, and then some of you'd have to do like the triplet on the ride cymbal for.
I can play the triangle.
See, there we go.
Cowbell.
There you go. We can do that. We can do a little gut bucket blues or something.
The recorder, I'm the man on the recorder,
See, there you go.
So with that, we have been running a little bit of a whatchamacallit here. Got a 100-yard dash here. We got some prizes to give away. A little promotion. Thanks, Calvin. Calvin's the smart one between us here. So I'm just going to try and make sure you can see the rest of us here. So I'm just going to pull the branding off here a little bit.
There you go.
Oh, majors never look better.
There we go. Hey.
So yeah, and Matt, you've graciously thrown in an RSP and a Dynasty package here as well. You just want to talk a little bit about what those are? We know what the RSP is, but
sure. The Dynasty package is basically, I do 2-year Dynasty projections, and you get it for every team, every player that I think is going to actually have a shot at contributing or making a roster. I update that multiple times a year, and then I also give you rankings. Dynasty rankings and their 4 win now strategies with a cheat sheet for that. That's on like basically 2-3 pages, and a long build type of version for that's tiered and gives you, they're both tiered cheat sheets from that standpoint. So you get, I'm not giving you all the detail. That's actually more of a just the answers type of thing. That I'm not always known for, but that's available. And so far people have really loved that, especially as part of a package deal with the RSP, where it gives you basically all the resource you need for the next 3 to 5 years.
That's fantastic. We got that. We got fantasy points. We got 3 fantasy point subscriptions that we're giving away as well. And we've got 3 mystery prizes that we're giving away as well. So we've got 8 total. So I think we got an 8 total. You talked about Michi there earlier, so we're going to shuffle this thing 8 times. We shuffled it 8 times, and we're going to do a little bit different here. We're going to go 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and then we're going to give dead last a prize. How does that sound?
Excellent.
I like that. That's good.
All right, here we go. We're going to start this rush off, and we are off in 1 and go.
Can we root for someone, or like what are we doing here? Are we?
Like, this is like that electric football game that we.
It is.
That I grew up with.
The greatest game ever.
See, there
Tecmo Bowl.
Yep.
Tecmo.
Well,
who's Bo? Looks like B. Schwartz looks like Bo Jackson on this. This end.
Yeah, you know what? It's going to be someone like Lobos that's going to take a huge. Yeah, there he goes right there. Now he's taking it. There we go. It's always someone that's kind of sitting back a little bit, and then they take off.
Yeah, Matt Daddy, 247 and all 22. They seem to be I got to root for all 22. I mean,
I think we should make this a 40-yard dash. Like,
well, I could have gone faster, but we got a little time to talk.
Upper Elo. Yeah.
What's your assessment here on this 40? Like, are we any of these guys with their 40 that you've seen? Are they draftable right now?
Matt Daddy's got a closing burst, I got to say.
Oh, wait,
all 22. I think
Andrew
all 22 is a pretty good prospect right there. I think he just did it. There we go.
Yep.
That's apropos, got to say.
Beast
sand. Oh, no. Quicksand. There we go.
Yeah. Here we go. Right. Okay, who's dead last here? Who's going to get that last spot?
It's going to be Bateman or Monsters.
Yeah.
I got
Chalupa Batman. Hey, Bateman's fast. Chalupa Batman, I'm not so sure about.
Oh, wait. Marvin These are the guys that pull up lane here.
If I ate a chalupa, I wouldn't be very fast either. So
I think it is.
Stop at the line.
It is. Chalupa Bateman pulls in the 22nd spot there.
There we go.
Great name, too.
Oh my, he's
Yeah.
still trying to finish.
He's in the end zone. There it is. Now it's
There we
official.
go.
Finally, there we go, buddy.
That or he ate fettuccine Alfredo, didn't drink any water.
Yes.
So we've got officially all 22 finalists: B. Schwartz 319, Andrew Nordmeyer, Matty Daddy 24/7, Upper Elo, Lobos FF Den, Bo Big Time, and of course we have Chalupa Batman as the 8th prize winner here, finishing 22nd.
Nice.
Congratulations, everyone.
Well done. Well done.
Whew, that was a good race.
Yes.
That was. I might next time we do something like that, I might have to put the speed a little bit faster there so we can.
I always wish football guys would do a commercial where they would have all the football guys like trying to work out and do like a football practice, and as if they were doing it seriously, and then we could just see the comedy that would ensue.
Oh, that's one of our questions we usually ask is about if we had a combine. We should have got that one.
Well, Cecil and Bloom did a famous workout. You guys need to find that. Have you seen that yet? Have you ever seen
I haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen
Oh, they go to work out with. Oh,
I remember Bloom was telling us about this.
Oh yeah, you guys need this. Like if you get Cecil on, you definitely need to get this and I'll send it to you. I'll find it, but it's literally they work out where Stevie Johnson worked out with Rashad Whitfield at the time, who's been on NFL Network.
Yeah,
and they participate in all the workout drills.
Oh yes, please send this.
Yeah,
please,
yes.
please.
We have.
I'm working with Cecil to get him on the show here right now, so we're just trying to set up a time there. So that's got to come out.
Yes, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. They got to know Marshawn Lynch during that time too, so that's how I think that's probably how we all became Marshawn Lynch fans, because he pretty much showed his personality and the way that he is as just an awesome soul during that time too.
Well, Calvin, you want to get us kind of moving on here? We're hitting that 116, 117 mark here now.
Yeah, appreciate all your time, Matt. Absolutely. I just want to say, thanks again for coming on the show and sharing your story. And I happen to like the stories, and I could sit there and listen to you tell those stories for long. I think I speak for everybody. Just listening to those stories that really that's why we wanted you on here. So that's I really appreciate you doing that. But I want to just highlight Tera. She just got done with her 30 for 30. Was breaking down a bunch of teams. Matt, you even mentioned that, and she did a great job with it. So if you have not checked those out and you're watching this, look, go check that out. She really did an awesome job. And it's hard to do. It's hard to make videos by yourself, as Matt knows. And she killed it. So make sure you go check those out. Hit the like button. Comment on it, give her some love. That'll help the algorithm on YouTube for her, and that'll be really good. Major is still holding it down at Clubhouse, but he's got some really cool shows coming up, and we workshopped the name last time, which I think we decided we were going to stick with, right?
No, absolutely not.
Where did you decide on a name?
I think I just might have to go with like the Way Too Major or sports podcast, something along those lines. Because every fantasy football name has been taken, and the stuff that you guys have given me, I'm gonna have to go with a no. But thank you guys.
I still like Majority Report, but okay, whatever, that's fine. Matt,
that might be a segment. I'll give you that. That might be a segment.
There you go.
How about what's your beef with Major?
There you go. What's your beef?
Nice.
And of course, Matt Donnelly has been killing it as well. Like, he's got a lot of stuff that's coming out, working behind the scenes with literally everyone. Like, I don't think people realize how much he does and the way he supports people. And just gives people their platform. Make sure that you are checking that out. He never likes to sell himself, but believe me, he's one of the best, one of the hardest working people here. And make sure you're following him. And we've got some great things, even some new shows. Matt, you want to tell them about the new show that is on Friday nights?
Yeah, we got the Dynasty Full Tilt Dynasty. They coming on there. Thomas Trippo there, and Jacob Sanderson, Big Billy. They coming on. They do their little bit there on Fridays, and I think they do a show on Mondays as well. And I'm telling you right now, with Major and Tera, they're just getting started here right now. There's big things coming for both of them. I promise you that right now. And as we head off here, Matt, maybe the thing I probably respect most about the RSP is where you send some of the funds to every year. I think that goes without said. It doesn't get talked about enough. We're talking Scott Fishbowl. We're talking donations. We're talking about charitable deeds. But something we don't talk about very often is what's near and dear to your heart with the RSP. Not only is it a quality magazine package and everything you get with that, but you're also doing a lot of good with it as well. And I think we need to talk about that more and kind of put that on a bit of a pedestal, because if we want to make a change in our everyday life, sometimes it starts with looking in the mirror, looking at ourselves first. And you've clearly done that and are making a difference in people's lives with that RSP magazine.
Well, I appreciate that. And certainly, if you don't know, the RSP gives a percentage of the sales up to about $5,000 a year. Now, I've capped that off for now, but we give about $5,000 a year since 2011 to Darkness to Light. And Darkness to Light is an organization devoted to preventing sexual abuse of children through training programs, as well as learning how to, or also teaching adults how to deal with sexual abuse when it does inevitably happen, so that doesn't compound the effects on the victim. So they teach individuals or schools, municipal organizations, law enforcement, pretty much anybody who wants to learn. You can go get training if you want to. They're an absolute great organization, and that your money's going to a good place, because I like to research charities through Charity Navigator, which is an organization that basically rates how well they use that money towards the purpose. And they scored a 100 out of a 100 recently on that. And when I first started giving to them, they still had a good score, but it wasn't that. So they've gotten better every year in terms of what they do, and that the money is going to a good place. So whether you want to get an RSP and I donate, annually to that, great. If you want to just donate to them, even better. You can do that. And this year, what was great is they had a donor who was willing to double donations to every donation that was given during June. So while I had given in $4,000 in May, I waited a little bit. I was going to wait till the end of the year, and then when June arrived and they were going to give double, I gave the final 1,000 in June, just so that they could get an extra 1,000 out of that as a result, due to the donation match. So again, very proud to be able to do that, and I know that the readers that I have are very proud of being able to contribute to be a part of that.
Nice.
That's fantastic. And I think that's a great way to end here as we go on. Just a quick reminder, we did give away 3 subscriptions, but if you're looking for your subscription to Fantasy Points there, use code there, 21Vipers10, get 10% off those subscriptions there. Just head over to fantasypoints.com and make sure to go get that RSP. It's never too late to get that. So for Matt, for Calvin, for Tera, for Major, for myself, this is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast, episode 80. The Village People and Tera, we gone. But first, I got to hit that music. If I can remember which one it is.